Rise and shine.
Welcome back to Rise and Shine Thursday's edition, and now it's that long-awaited moment that we were talking about, privacy, online security, and how to be safe because everybody's online right these days. So today, to do that, we have a wonderful guest with us. We have Mr. Kavingeyappa Abeyewardena, the lecturer of Faculty of Computing of Sri Lanka Institute of Information Technology. Good morning, Mr. Kavinge.
Yeah, nice to be here. Yeah.
Welcome to the show, and we are honored to have you here. And I'm sure everybody is waiting because we've been teasing everybody from morning that we are going to tell them and how they can be safe. So to start off the show, I would like to ask. So I use the word privacy and protection online. So what does this privacy mean, Kavinge?
Well, privacy actually could mean different things for different perspectives. But if you take domestic users who are using their mobile phone on a day-to-day basis, privacy would be something like protecting your confidential data. So it could be your bank balance, but at the same time, it could be a picture of yours. So if you post up a cover picture in Facebook, that's something that you don't want privacy for. That's because it's out there for everybody to see. But for your bank balance, you don't want anybody to see, unless I guess you want them to see it. But the idea is, if you have particular data or information that you don't want others to see, you should be protecting them by taking necessary steps. So this is what we call actually privacy. But this could mean different things in different domains.
Right. So we're going to focus on the domestic users initially, because I think many people have a smartphone now. As you did mention, they take pictures, they post it online, and you have mobile banking, and you have a lot to be done at home and at your fingertips, which is convenient, true. But as you did mention, there's something called privacy, something which we wouldn't want others to see. So let's talk about domestic users and the biggest concerns of privacy for them.
Yeah, well, domestic users, it's for the attackers, or what we call these hackers. It's a different kind of an attack vector that they use on domestic users. So they're not the same target as the corporate customers. So what they look for in domestic users is if they are gullible for attacks, if they're like very vulnerable. So most of the time it would be the elderly generation being attacked. So the areas of concern I would put into 4 categories, I guess. The main area is what we call phishing attacks, right? This is very similar to the phishing attacks, but spelled differently. But the idea is you send something that looks extremely genuine. It could be an email coming from your bank or coming from the workplace, and then they get you to click on it, and then they get you to fill certain things like your passwords or even your addresses and things like that. And that particular information they extract from you, and then they further use this information to generate another attack, which looks even more genuine, right? So this kind of phishing attacks, there are about 2 types. One is called the general phishing attacks. This used to be what happened in the past. I don't know whether you're aware of this. About few good years ago, there was this scam going on saying Nigerian princess wanting to send money.
I was about to ask you that about the gold.
Yes. So these kind of attacks, it's not that common anymore, because the reason is now people are more aware of it. Because you do know that there are no Nigerian princes willing to give you $100,000. So nowadays what you have is what we call spear phishing attacks. Spear phishing is where you actually target a single person. So for example, if I Google your name, I might be able to find some interesting stuff about you, like what you like, where you work, things like that. And then what I do is I generate my email, my suspicious email. It won't look suspicious anymore because I'm targeting at you, the email. So then you'll be getting an email that looks very, very genuine. It's addressed to you. It talks about your interests. It talks about what you want, what you've been searching in the internet for. And then you highly likely to click on that link, and that's where it starts. So this is what we call phishing attacks. There's only one type of attacks that we just talked about. So there are way more things to talk about, things like I would say malwares, right? So you tend to install so many different software in your mobile phone these days and your laptops. This kind of software sometimes comes with baggage, right? So there are tiny other software installed in your mobile phone or your PC without your knowledge, and they do certain bad things. So things like communicating to the attacker, sending your personal information, things like that.
So how can we screen all those?
It's very difficult, but the thing is, for a domestic user, screening process can start from, I guess, abnormal behavior of your mobile phone, or it could be the abnormal behavior of your laptop. So when I say your mobile phone, it could be the suddenly your mobile phone starts to slow up, and the day-to-day things that you've been doing is not working anymore. And if you take your laptop, if you open up an application, it takes about 5 or 6 minutes for the application to load up. If you see these kind of behavior, and sometimes when you open up web browsers, if it doesn't let you do what you want to do, if it keeps popping up with certain messages, that could be a sign, and that could be a sign that you are already infected. In that case, better to consult someone who's actually good at taking care of something like that.
All right, so since you mentioned about the reverse engineering of social media by hackers, and since all these devices are right now in our hands, and all these mobile devices we are just using on, I mean, 24 hours. So how can we make sure that we are not being targeted for such kind of an attack, or rather be safe from this kind of an attack?
Yeah, well, I don't think it's simple as refrain from social media, because that's never going to happen. I mean, people are going to use social media. I mean, at least we tried few weeks ago, but it didn't work because people started using VPNs and all this kind of. We'll talk about VPNs later on. But having said that, the mobile phone itself, the rule number one is you have to have a password for your mobile phone. So nowadays it can be a PIN number or a swipe pattern, but the most modern phones, they have fingerprint, which is probably the best way you can protect your device at the beginning, and then make sure that your phone is up to date. Right? Rule number two, very, very important, that you update your operating system software, because this is very important. Our domestic users, they are bound with data download limit restrictions these days, right? So what they do is they know that if you get an update to your mobile phone or your computer, since it's a large download, they wait till wait. They don't want to spend their data on a software update, but that's a very bad practice. So you have to actually update your operating system, update your mobile devices. That's the only way you can stay safe.
Now I feel guilty for putting later on my update.
So don't click later.
Yes.
You need to update your mobile phones, and that's like the initial step of being safe.
Yes.
And speaking of the biggest concerns on mobile phones, shall we touch on the areas which is kind of some of the biggest concerns on mobile phones in terms of privacy?
In terms of privacy in mobile phones, I would say there are this type of malware called spyware. We call them spyware. What happens is, once again, the attackers, they tend to send you something that looks genuine, and you once again get duped by it, and you download certain software. And this particular spyware, what they do is they actually sit on your mobile device, and they sort of sleep in your mobile device until you start to use the keyboard, where they actually tend to log all the keystrokes that you put in. That could be your password, that could be your bank account details, confidential information, whatever it is. And then what they do is, whenever your device goes online, they create a connection with the attacker, and then they send all that information to the attacker. So we call them spyware. And also, one thing to be wary of when you're using mobile phones is downloading these applications, especially applications from unknown sources, right? So when you download the application, it comes with a lot of other mini applications that you'll have to probably avoid, and sometimes it could be a game, right? We all love games, so you download the game, but the game comes with some other baggage. So things like advertisements popping up all the time. So those kind of things are most of the time what they try to do is they try to get you to click on something, and then based on that they devise their next strategy, the attackers. So that's another area of concern, I would say, in the mobile phone.
And you also spoke of VPNs a
Yes,
little while ago, and yes, you couldn't stop people from using social media, at least for a day.
Yeah.
I would say.
I would say
I
one
think
day.
immediately
Yes.
people got to know what VPN is, and whoever didn't know.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that and how if that is safe.
If I would say yes or no answer, the answer is it's not safe. Unless you can trust the VPN server that you're getting connected to, because what it really does is it creates you sort of a virtual tunnel, so that you can go to a different country, not physically but virtually. You're going to a different country and starting your connection from that point onwards. But the only problem with that sort of a connection is that you are actually sending your particular confidential information. It could be your login details for your Facebook account, or it could be your login details for some other banking application. This information goes to that particular country, and that server or the provider gets to see your data, and then he actually repackages the data, and they have to send it to the merchant. So merchant
This is
or the
scary.
Facebook. Yeah, so it's actually as much as trusting your delivery guy.
Yes.
So
I think more than me, I would say, see, if somebody gets my confidential data, that would be a bunch of weird passwords. But for someone who is actually practically using social media for a lot of stuff, because we see a lot of entrepreneurs using social media, and we see a lot of medium to large scale businesses also relying on social media and online presence, and also definitely online transactions when it comes to their businesses. So what kind of security do they need, and what kind of impact do they have when it comes to security and cyber privacy?
So I think it's good that you touched upon the point of passwords, because passwords tend to be the biggest concern these days. Because in those days you have like very simple passwords. What's your mother's name, and you put it as a password, or your girlfriend's name or boyfriend's name, it doesn't matter. But today it's not that simple. I mean, the thing is, there are attackers out there who have actually calculated your passwords already. They already have a database of your passwords. Things like that you can predict. We call this dictionary kind of attacks, because all the names, all the words in the dictionary, it's always saved by the attackers already. So if you are using a simple password, then you actually are highly likely to be in trouble. So the only way that you can avoid this is to have a stronger password. That's why you have organizations employing password policies for different number of letters, uppercase, lowercase, with numbers involved and with symbols involved and things like that. So you need to make sure your password is different. That's rule number one, I guess. Rule number two is the password that you are using should not be used in multiple applications. That's something I think everyone is guilty of. Yes, even I do it sometimes. So it's not something that is actually good. So the problem is, once one of your applications get breached, that means all other applications are in trouble. So that's the major concern. So at least the best thing is to use one separate password for your email account, and then you can use a separate password for all the other applications. Because if email account gets hacked, then you're in trouble, because all the other passwords can be reset via the email account. So
Yes.
That's like totally scary, and I think many people watching would probably be changing passwords now, because we need to have different passwords, and they say don't put everything in one bucket, and
Exactly.
so don't put all the eggs in a basket.
Yes.
So this is something like that.
Exactly.
And don't have the same password for everything. Make sure you at least have a hold of something. And it's interesting that we are on this topic and about what could attack us through the internet as well. So what are the trending concerns in today's internet?
Yes, I think last year around this time I came to this particular program, and we discussed about this attack those days that was very famous, which we called ransomware, where actually the attacker once again sent a certain application to your computer, and then they lock down your data. So that is probably the most trending type of attack these days. This locking scenario is a major concern for small businesses, and especially even domestic users, because that's their private data that's been locked by a third party. So you have to depend on them. You have to pay them a ransom. I tend to call this in my for my students, I call them digital kidnapping. right? So it's basically you have to pay the ransom if you want your data back. The only problem is it doesn't guarantee you that they will give you the necessary instructions to unlock your data as well. So sometimes there are people who pay around $500 to get their data back, but they do not receive the instructions to unlock. So that is probably the most trending type of attacks these days. Apart from that, as I said, phishing attacks are, especially spear phishing attacks, are becoming highly likely. And also we have a different type of attacks called farming attacks, which where this is once again starts with PH. It's a different farming attack. So what happens is you log into a website and you think it's a website that you already know, but unfortunately it looks like your bank's website, but it's actually the website that has been hosted by an attacker. So you have been redirected to a fake website that is actually looking very genuine. So the only way that you can track this is by checking the URL whether you have actually reached the correct web address. So this might be very difficult for some domestic users because they are not aware of URLs and things like that. So the best idea is not to click on things that you are not sure of.
Yes, a couple of years back, I think a lot of social media with the same look kind of websites also kind of popped out and just wanting you to click
On it. Yeah.
So all you out there who are trying to hack me, I don't think you will get anything out of me because everything is here. You cannot hack me here. So apart from that, so since we were talking about small scale businesses and medium scale businesses being attacked, why is it that these kind of small scale people are being attacked more than the others, I mean large scale businesses?
That's a very good question, because large scale businesses, that's the only thing that we tend to hear in the media whenever an attack happens. For example, a few years ago eBay servers got hacked and they about 13 million customer details were leaked. And if you take Amazon, Sony PlayStation Network, these kind of attacks happen and they get a lot of media attention because they are like multinational corporations. But if you look at the actual data breaches that is happening around the world, according to statistics, it's about 70% of the attacks are more focused towards small to medium scale businesses. When I say small to medium, it's about 100 employees or less. So this is probably surprising for most of the people who are not aware of the security domain, but the reason this happens is if you take large scale organizations, they have a budget. They have a security budget, they have specialized people looking after their equipment, looking after their servers and data and confidential information. If you take a small scale organization, there are people who are doing the role of multiple people. So I mean, like you have security officer who's actually looking after the actual physical security as well and everything. So it's not that simple for them because you don't have dedicated people looking after the servers or systems, and you don't have dedicated budget for it. So because of that, attackers find these kind of places more attractive. So they think that they are more vulnerable and gullible, and especially because employees are not aware of security concerns. If you take a small scale businesses, as you said, they tend to think we are safe, right? Because we are a small business, no one's going to attack us. But that's actually not the case. It's quite the opposite, because they are more attractive for hackers than the large scale organizations.
Exactly. So since you did mention about many people, you know, working towards privacy in large scale companies, and we don't have them in small scale companies, so I think, isn't that the main cause as well?
Yes, because the reason is large scale companies, they tend to collaborate with high-end security inventors. So they have the latest trends and devices protecting their organizations, whereas small scale businesses, what they do is they just want the business to be done, right? Whether it's in the right way or the fastest way possible, that's what they want to do. So when you try to balance this usability and security, usability also always gets the priority, because you want your clients, you want your customers to be very happy with your service. So sometimes you will have to ignore the security concerns. So when you do that, you are actually much more vulnerable to attacks than you think.
And what kind of security concerns are you talking of in terms of small scale
if you take small scale organizations, it's it's very different. Once again, the most attractive part for the attackers is the confidential information of the company. When I say the company, most of the time it's the clients, the client details. So client details, when I say, I mean, if you take their credit card information, sometimes you store them. So that particular kind of information is very attractive towards them, or else intellectual property. If your particular company is working on something very secret, something is going to give you advantage over your competitors, that is also always a target for the companies, for the attackers. And if I give you an example, there was a cousin of mine who actually got infected through a ransomware. This was a few years ago. This was a different ransomware, and he was actually a wedding photographer. So his entire library of pictures, it got locked. So you have to pay the ransom to get it unlocked. So that is type of an attack that attackers tend to depend on, because you have to survey them beforehand. So basically you have to survey what his job is, what he's doing for a living. So if you look at a photographer, his entire savings of the images is what his job depends on. So that kind of a thing is what you have to be wary of.
All right. So since we came to this topic, so I'm sure there's a lot of small-scale businessmen and a lot of entrepreneurs who are working so hard to get something across and to make a noise. So how can these guys be safe? Because they do not have big budgets to invest on security, and they do not have personnel specifically for this task, and they will definitely have one person doing multitasking. So how can you be safe, and how can these people out there save themselves rather than not connecting to the internet?
Yes.
How can they do it?
Right. So not connecting to the internet is not an option these days. That's the thing. So as
you
you
can't
said,
without it.
Yeah, you can't live without it. So anyway, even the business to succeed, you have to be connected to the internet. That's the real nature of it. I would say there are few things that they can do. Starting from there are what we call the devices called firewalls. Firewalls you have for different budgets. So if your small scale organization is willing to spend up to a certain level of budget on that particular device, it can help you to actually isolate your network from the outside world, from bad things. So this is, we are talking about all the information going out of your business as well as all the information coming into your business. Everything gets filtered. So this particular device, depending on your budget, will have different capabilities. Sometimes it will be able to tell you if somebody is trying to access something that is not allowed from inside the network to the outside. So those kind of things, as well as attackers inside your company itself. I mean, you don't want to disgruntle your employees and they turn into attackers themselves. So things like that also can be detected if you purchase these kind of devices, so which sometimes will cost you a lot, but depending on the budget, there are devices that you can purchase. That is one thing. And apart from that, as I said, password policies, that's very important. I mean, when I say it's very important, you have different password policies where you want to have uppercase, lowercase letters, but there is no point if your password is under the keyboard. I mean, that tends to happen a lot.
At the back of a book.
Back of the book, or in your mobile phone. Sometimes some people save it on your mobile phone, the password list. These kind of things should not happen. I mean, this is what we call the gullible nature of human being. I mean, we tend to do this. So
because we tend to forget.
Because we tend to forget, exactly. So the reason is the attackers find these kind of things attractive because most of the employees, they are not aware of these concerns, right? They'll say, okay, they find my password, so what? Right? So they will get into the computer. That's all that's going to happen. But it's not that simple, because they, as I said, they can install a spyware where it can sit for ages and then collect all the information throughout the period, and then start a much more serious attack on you later on. So that's the case. So I was talking about firewalls, I guess, and password policies, and employees being aware of it, and things like that have to be taken into consideration. So at least you need to have one person taking care of these things, responsible. And lastly, I guess, backups, very, very important.
You need to have backups.
You need to have backups. I mean, regular backups, constant backups of entire the data that you actually want to be protected. So that way you don't have to pay ransom later on.
You can
to,
have an extra hard disk.
Yes, yes, and protect your data through backups. Very, very important to have constant backups.
Yes, definitely. Backing up is important because I've not been hacked, but I definitely know how bad it is when you lose your data. So if you're losing it because of a hacker, I don't think you'll be very happy about that. So I think with that, I just wanted to know what is the general, is there a message for the general public when you're online, just to be safe?
Yes, especially for the younger generation who's actually depending on social media. I mean, we all depend on social media these days. So the first thing is, when you're about to post something, you can ask the question, are you okay with this being in the internet forever? Because you tend to think, if I delete it tomorrow, it's not there anymore. That's wrong. It's actually, once it's posted, it's out of your control. And things like that, and you have to ask that question, whether are you okay with it to be there forever, then okay, go ahead and post. And also, are you okay with it, with the audience that's seeing this? Who's going to see this, and who's going to be able to save this particular post? So if you can ask this question all the time before posting, then I think you are highly likely to be aware of the security concerns about the things that you're posting. It can be images, it can be simple text data, whatever it is, you have to ask that question. So that would be the biggest message I can give. But apart from that, never click on links that you're not sure of. So whenever you see something that is dodgy, something suspicious, never click on it, because it's highly likely, 90% chance that it's coming from an attacker that is trying to initiate an attack on you.
So there you go. Don't click on the banners which say you are about to win an iPhone X. So thank you very much, Kavinga, for being here with us and sharing all this wonderful information, because I think it's very essential information at this time. And it's with that, it's time for us to also say goodbye.
It's time for us to say bye-bye. Thank you
Thank
once
you.
again.
Thanks for having me.
Well, with that, it's time for us to wind up Rise and Shine Thursday's edition. Join us again tomorrow too.